If I knew the answer to that question, I would not be here. I would have sold that answer. I'd be out on that golf course with all of you, and we'd be talking about something else. But let me give you the situation as I know it. So the passage of the HIRE Act, I don't even know what HIRE stands for anymore. We just call it the Reed Jobs Bill. Got us an extension of the Safe, Accountable, Flexible, Efficient Transportation Equity Act, a legacy for users, which is going to get a shorter name this time around. It's the last thing I do, because I don't want to be spelling out something like safety loop for another 6 years. We got an extension through December 31st, 2010. Along with that extension, another $19.5 billion in general tax revenue was put in the Highway Trust Fund. And that should keep the Highway Trust Fund going through 2011. I never like to give a specific date because you're just never sure how those things are going to shake out. Those two things are very significant in and of themselves. First, December 31st, 2010 implies what the strategy has to be for the rest of the year. And the second is that $19.5 billion represents a real threat to the future of federal transportation programs. So let's talk about strategy first. December 31st, 2010. Best case scenario, the House gets its reauthorization package ready to go to the floor. So we already got Chairman Oberstar in the House Transportation Infrastructure Committee. He's written 800 pages. For that bill to be fully fleshed out, you probably need another 1,200 pages once you really start reading it. He says he's ready to go on policy. Now, if you sat down and read that whole bill, which I admit I haven't even yet, that's why we have people who write summaries for us. I mean, you can't read that kind of legislation. There's a lot of stuff in it that's good and is in a good direction, and there's a lot of stuff in it that is not so good. So we got policy issues we've got to deal with Mr. Oberstar. But the bigger issue in the House is how are you going to pay for his bill? It's $450 billion over 6 years for highways and transit. Another $50 billion for high-speed passenger rail. We need to come up with between $130, $150 billion in new revenue to pay for just the highway and transit portion of that bill. And that revenue needs to be user fee based, lest we no longer have a highway trust fund. What is the easiest, most straightforward, simplest way to get a user fee based bunch of revenue? It's raising the gas tax. Now I realize where I am in the world. I am in East Texas. I was reading through Mr. Gomert's website and I thought, this is not the kind of guy who's going to vote to raise the gas tax. Unfortunately, that becomes a little teeny tiny problem. Because if we can't come up with $130, $150 billion in user fee-based revenues, we're not going to get Mr. Oberstar's bill. And in order to come up with that money, which is probably going to have to come from something like a gas tax increase, we need people on both sides of the aisle to vote for it. That's why the U.S. Chamber is actually supportive of raising fuel taxes. It's been since 1993. Federal fuel tax is at 18.4 cents a gallon. It's worth about half of that today than it was in 1993. We're not keeping up with maintaining what we got, much less trying to fix things for the future. All right, so big problem in the House. How are we going to get the money? Senate, I got a similar story for you. Surprise. Except in the Senate, I got 4 committees that have to get their portions of the bill ready to go so we can get it done by the end of the year. So you got the Environment and Public Works Committee. That's Barbara Boxer from California and Jim Inhofe from your neighboring state of Oklahoma. Now they don't agree on much, but they actually agree a lot on transportation. And they're working to try and write a bill right now. That's fantastic, except they've only got the highway portion and the environmental planning portions. We got to get the Commerce Committee, and that would be, of course, Senator Hutchinson, working on portions of the bill for rail and for safety and trucking and all of that good stuff. I'm not even sure where they are. And then we got to get the Banking Committee, of all things, to write the transit portion of their bill. They're probably furthest along. They're not flashing it out there anywhere, but Senator Dodd's got some really good staff, and they're writing their transit pieces of the bill. And then you got the Finance Committee, run by Max Baucus, and Max Baucus has, for some reason, been a little bit busy this year. Maybe it's the health care bill, maybe it's the tax bills, but they don't have a solution either. And when I sit and talk to their staff, they say, well, you know, unless you can get people outside the Beltway, calling their members and saying, we need you to get a transportation bill done and we're willing to pay for it, we're not getting a bill this year. So therein lies our big challenge. So our strategy, at least from the U.S. Chamber's perspective, is first of all, December 31st would fall at the very end of the lame duck session of Congress. So we're working a lame duck strategy. Do I absolutely think there's a fantastic chance of getting a gas tax increase and getting these bills written and passed out of the House and the Senate in conference by December 31st? Well, as the way I put it, my brother's a rocket scientist, so I try and do mathematical analogies periodically. Probability is approaching zero, but it's not quite, which is why I'm here. And why I'm not just here today, I'm in Dallas tomorrow, and I'm in Chicago on Thursday, and I'm back in Houston a few days later. It's because it will not be up to people like me, or organizations like the U.S. Chamber in Washington to move the ball on safety lou reauthorization. Members have to hear from you. Now I know you hear this from us all the time. Kelly's on conference calls with the Chamber. We're always saying, can you come talk to us about card check? And be sure you call your members about the health care bill. Get on that Longview Votes website and do X, Y, and Z. I am telling you that now more than ever before, the power is in the hands of people in states and districts to articulate what has to be a priority in federal legislation. I have had more Hill staff, more members of Congress tell me, if you want to get transportation up on the agenda, we've got to start hearing from people at home that it's important. So, I have to ask you once again, next time that Mr. Gomer is back in the district, or when you all come to Washington and come to the Small Business Summit and then do your fly-in in May, don't worry, we'll have good weather for you. Cherry blossoms will be gone, they're going to be gone in a couple of days. But we'll get something else looking nice and blooming and being all good for you. We desperately need you to talk about transportation. And here's why. It's that second piece of what I talked about.